Hi, this video is to show how to name both molecular compounds and acids. First of all, for molecular compounds, remember the first step is to determine what type of compound it is. If it starts with a nonmetal, remember that is any element that is to the right of the stair step. All right, that's a nonmetal. The first element is a nonmetal. Then it is a molecular compound. And you basically use the Greek prefixes to indicate what the subscripts are. Also, the first element you just name normally. Second element, you need to include or just use the root, and then it must end in "ide." The Greek prefixes are found in your learning packet, but also they will be provided on the test. These are they. All right. So, for example, N2F7, N is nitrogen. So we write nitrogen. Since it has a 2, the Greek prefix for 2 is di. So it is dinitrogen. The second element is fluorine, but since it's the second element, it has to end in ide. So it is called fluoride. But since it has a 7 as a subscript, that 7's Greek prefix is hepta, so we write hepta. So the name of that compound is dinitrogen heptafluoride. Next, we have P4S8. All right, P is phosphorus, so we have phosphorus, but there's 4 of them. So we write the Greek prefix for 4, which is tetra, and then 8 sulfurs. Since it's the second element, it has to end in ide, but since there's 8, it's octasulfide. Now, the one exception to this is the fact that if it starts with a single element, even though normally you would put mono, the names of molecular compounds can never start with mono. So in this case, instead of calling this monosilicon, we simply call it silicon, and then we name the second part tetrabromide. If you have one of the second element, then you can in fact use mono, and you must. So in this case, CO, this is carbon, not monocarbon, simply carbon, and then monoxide, or simply monoxide. Now, for acids, remember, are ionic compounds that start with an H and end in AQ. They are ionic compounds where they have hydrogen as the positive cation, and they are dissolved in water, so they end in AQ. For example, you could have HCl, AQ. This is an acid because it starts with an H and ends with AQ. Now, since all acids start with H, hydrogen is not actually part of the name. Instead, the name focuses on the name of the anion. So once we've established it's an acid, we can ignore the hydrogen and focus simply on the anion. So we start by figuring out the name of that anion. Now remember, if it's a monoatomic anion, such as this, you simply take the name of the element, chlorine, and remove the ending, keeping the root, and add IDE. So that is chloride. Now, to make this into the acid's name, we take a look at this anion's name and look at the ending, and we refer to the acid naming table, which can be found in your learning packet. Also, this will be provided for you on the test. Now, anions can always end in one of 3 possible endings: ide, ite, or ate. And what you simply do is, once you figure out what the ending is, you remove the ending and you add the bold-faced add-on to the remaining root. For example, in this case, we have HCl. All right, we have HCl, which is chloride, is the name of the anion. And instead of "ide," we drop "ide." And as we see here, we add hydro, and then to the front, and then ic acid to the back. So instead of chloride, it becomes hydrochloric acid, where hydro and ic and acid are the add-ons. Take another example. Let's say we have H2C2O4 AQ. Now in this case, we remove the hydrogen and the AQ. We're left with C2O4. This is a polyatomic anion. Instead of taking the names of carbon and oxygen, we find the name of the polyatomic anion by looking for it on the back of the periodic table. And here we see C2O4 is called oxalate. So we take that name, oxalate, and we see, oh look, it ends in 8. We remove the 8 and simply add ic acid. So we remove the 8 and simply take the root name and then add ic acid. So H2CO4, ion's name is oxalate, it becomes oxalic acid. Now there are 2 exceptions to this rule that you'll need to remember. And those can be found right here. It's called the Pour-Sur rule. If an anion contains either phosphorus or sulfur, you need to add an additional syllable before you add on the boldface suffix down here. All right, if it's phosphorus, you add an OR. If it is sulfur, all right, you add a UR. For example, let's say we have H3PO4AQ. So we're looking at this is an acid, so we get rid of the hydrogen and the AQ. We look at PO4. Once again, that's a polyatomic anion, so we look for the name of it on the back of the periodic table. PO4 is right here, and it's called phosphate. So we write phosphate. Now, since this ends in 8, normally we would simply take off the 8 and add ic acid. But because it contains the element phosphorus, we have to add an OR before we add the ic. So we have phos, we add the additional OR, and then we have ic acid. So it becomes, instead of phosphoric acid, it becomes phosphoric acid. And that is how you name acids. Thank you.